Welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Well, depending upon where you're at on the planet, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Most importantly, it's an honor to join you again here at Lead Live, LEAD standing for Leadership Excellence and Achievement on Demand. Why leadership? Why mindset? Particular mindset that leads to remarkable leadership. Timely, I believe, we believe, because of what is happening so pervasively across this planet. The lack of leadership we can easily point to. Effective leadership, sometimes we have challenges pointing to. And so this broadcast is about reminding us of our own capacity to exceed even our high expectations in this area of leadership. Walking, living, sleeping, understanding with the right kind of mindset that is transformative, that adds value. We think about the last just year, COVID-19, stressors that many people are experiencing. And I know some of you watch from television and you use this as a means to reground and to remind you of your capacity. And we're so appreciative of that. So thank you for those stories. And for those of you who are already so inspired and you're on the track, you can think of high quality leadership. Kudos to you. And thank you for adding questions to our weekly Lead Live broadcast and in advance so that we can answer them to inspire more and to provide more with tools. Today, we're talking about innovative leadership because we want you to remember, for those of you who already know, and for those who have yet to experience, to know that there's folks in various spaces all across this planet who are making a difference, and they are by definition innovative leaders. And what makes them so, in part to a great degree, part of their foundation is the coherence, the synergy, the consistency between their heart and their mind. Now, what do I mean by mind? Most people think of the brain right away. They think of something in the head. When I say mind, I'm talking about the aspect of that essence of who we are that uh, embodies the intellectual faculties, the mental faculties, as well as the feeling or emotional faculties. And that the emotional faculties is that heart connection. Without going into the science that I've learned, that I've read from people who are much more learned than I am. We'll have a special session on that in the near future, just talking about the power of the heart and how it literally sends more signal to the brain than the reverse, and the power of the mind, and that it's in every cell of the body and it vibrates outside of the body. The interesting thing about leaders who are innovative, they inspire that among their team. They're not working as an isolate usually. They're working in partnership, and they're inspiring that kind of engagement using the creative aspects of the individuals involved and the partners involved. They expect certain results. So, what I wanted to do was start off with sharing with you. And good afternoon, Olive and Tomoko. Thank you for joining, and thank you for the many others who can't provide notes here because they're watching through some other medium. Keep them coming. Please actively participate. I read an article recently, and I thought I bring it to our attention. It's a recent article, but it's not. It was created last year, and it's based upon a study, and it's reflected in the MIT Sloan Management Review in 2020. And it talks about leading, and they use the words lead with your heart and your mind, or your head and your heart. Another way of saying heart mind connection. And they said the CEOs who manage emergencies using emotion as well as logic and intuition, well, intuition is one of the mental tools. We'll come back to that in a second. They find the best result in the short term and in the long term, or for the long haul. Over the past 30 years, they studied and consulted with nearly 100 CEOs in Europe, Asia, and North America. And these are individuals who had to deal with real crisis, large scale crisis. And what they found is that they literally led in one of three or multiple of these three ways. They were functional smart leaders, relying on their survival instincts. They focused on the bottom line to do whatever it took to keep their companies afloat. They were business smart leaders who were optimistic always, even in the face of what may have appeared to be a rationale for closing down the business. They were optimistic. They found clever ways to leverage a crisis and develop strategies to capture post disaster opportunities. So when we're in a crisis, we have a tendency of thinking right now, and that's it. And it's hard for us to get outside of the forest, among the trees, and then look at the real and understand that there's a forest with streams, with animals, with insects, with small clusters of other things. We have a tendency of staying very narrow, and we see the trees around us. We see only discrete things that are right in front of us. We don't tend to even look up. We may look around, but not much. Well, what these clever individuals did is they looked into the future. They didn't have a crystal ball, but they imagined, they thought big. And I'll give you at least one good example of just the power of that thinking big looks like. Well, embedded are these four capacities of wise leaders, demonstrating the heart mind coherence, connection, alignment, consistency of engagement, interaction. One is the broaden employees' perspective and purpose. This is what they did. They broaden employees' perspective and purpose. They embrace frugal innovation. Come back to that in a second. They reframe sustainability as creative resilience. They channel radical openness to foster connectedness. Okay, so let's take one of those at a time. So they broaden employees' perspective and purpose. What does that mean? They invited employees to serve the society at large and not just a narrow niche of customers. It doesn't matter how big the organization was. They thought bigger, said, okay, what about the entire society? The United States, the world, rather than just a particular set of customers. Siemens is one example. So they evolved from a business to business model to a business to society model. That was intentional. Had a vision. Come back to that vision notion in a second. They leverage all their assets, their talents, their partnerships with other organizations to have a positive social impact in the 200 plus countries in which they operate. They enabled local economic growth and job creation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and including more women and people of color in the workplace. And the message from the CEO was transparent, along with other CEOs, is that they're about an enlightened self interest. They're seeing themselves in the future. And in order to be in the future, you got to serve the greatest good. It's very selfish, very business wise. That means creatively addressing global issues such as social inequality, climate change, and health emergencies. Let's go into the second one, embrace frugal innovation. So it can be easy to forget our abundance resourcefulness during crisis when scarcity mindset sets in. And we talk about mindset a lot here. What we think, how we think, what we think about, what we let come into our mental processes, our emotional state affects our predisposition, affects our actions, affects our emotional commitment, affects our sense of responsibility. So be mindful of your mindset, what you think about, what you let into your thoughts, what you let into your affects your feelings. So leaders like one individual they named, James Dyson, he knew that his employees needed to be asked to tap into their inner resources, not just what people could see, but their inner resources, their own consciousness, their own feelings, their own capacity that were not otherwise demonstrated, like ingenuity and compassion. They are capable of radically reinventing company products, so they understood. He understood supply chains and business models for the betterment of humanity. And so, as an example of frugal innovation, we have the example of car makers like Ford, Tesla, and Toyota, who repurpose, many of us know, factories in order to do what? To make ventilators. Clothing companies like Zara and Gap adapted their apparel factories to do what? Make hospital gowns and masks. And then cosmetic giants like L'Oreal and LVMH, what do? They use their factories to make hand sanitizers. So this is an example of being clear. Embrace frugal innovation. Frugal is not to be negated. And then can you imagine taking that and scaling that and thinking about even more transformative innovation, not just the practical, what we need right now, but really the imaginative? I'm thinking about education, changing it, transforming it, whether it's K through 12 or higher education for that matter, and saying, okay, if we flipped it, whatever that means, not just flip in terms of lecture out of classroom, that's what you do before classroom, and lessons in classroom where you actually are engaging in practical work. I'm talking about flipping so much and say, what does society need? And how do we ensure that that need, that's not just present, but in the future, can we imagine something that's profound that we can create and then inspiring countless people to be part of that innovative set of activities? The next one is channel radical openness to foster connectedness. So they indicate that many employees do what? They get demoralized when a crisis hit. Well, many people were demoralized for good reasons. They lost their jobs, their source of income, and many homes, family members. Oh my goodness. Medical expenses went off the charts that affected everything else. A lack of certainty, which some of us thrive in, but many of us don't. We're not used to having a level of uncertainty. So much led to fears of people's own lives and their stability. So, what happened with coronavirus 19 pandemic? Beyond just the death, the fallout economically. So, what did these some of these leaders do? uh, they could they honor the fact they could pay attention to being afraid and stay in that space, which many people still are, or they can look at what the opportunities are and focus in a much more optimistic way on what's working. And so, what did they do? They admired those who were serving the countless and growing number, the ridiculous number of patients, those we know and those we don't know, the healthcare workers, the millions of them, the sanitary workers, the other individuals who gave of themselves selfishly, and others who had to do what they had to do in order to bring in income to sustain themselves and their families and the community. And yet they did it in a way that demonstrated bravery. So we could look at it in one way or we look at it another way, recognizing that those things coexist and choose the more optimistic, ambitious, seeing opportunities in the midst of these challenges to move forward. So what's an example of that? So let's give an interesting example of someone who years ago, back in 2009, Paul Pullman with Unilever in 2009, during the height of the crisis, the financial crisis that was horrific then for its time, causing all kinds of massive negative impacts across this country alone, and primarily in this country that we lived in, the U.S. Uh, he looked at that financial crisis, and rather than doing what a lot of people did, which was sell off things, engage in massive layoffs, what did they do? He said, okay, we're going to take the Caesar's opportunity and we're going to upsize the company. Any rational person would say, what? And have complete cognitive dissonance and emotional dissonance for that matter. Like, what are you talking about? Well, this person led his company to launch what? The Unilever Sustainable Living Plan established the goal of improving the health and well being of over 1 billion people and enhancing the livelihoods of millions by 2020. That was last year. And having the company, literally splitting the company in half in terms of the amount of ecological impact that it had, splitting it in half from whatever it was to half of that by 2030. So here's the deal. Initially, what happened? We can predict it. The stock plummeted at least 8%. Okay, but let's fast forward to 2020. What happened? Including gender parity in management and the use of 100% renewable electricity worldwide. Their shareholders were very happy because the return was 290% during from the 2009 to 2018. What? What do you mean? An extraordinary vision, one could say a massive risk, this optimistic and understanding that the company had to be literally interconnected with the solutions that serves humanity. And what did humanity do, or life itself do? Pay it back to that organization manyfold. So now they have a bigger goal. So what am I talking about? What are we really discussing here? This is why heart-mind synergy, coherence, consistency is important to innovative leadership, because it leads to better decisions. The thought, intentions, actions align. What else? It shows we care. Innovative leadership, well, one could say, well, innovative leadership does not mean have to show that we care. Well, if it's really innovative and it's leadership in the classic sense with inherent values that serve the greater good, yes, it does. It connects us to a deeper, more profound source within. These CEOs, on the surface, you could say, well, they had a bet and they just happened to be successful. Well, I'm so glad they went with that bet and they were successful, because that means we're all better off. Yet I would suggest something more profound because of the research, what they found. But I think a lot of folks who tend to lead that I've experienced, and probably many of you, lead in a way that shows the inherent value for the other, value for society, value for humanity. They understand, even if they don't call it a heart-mind connection, they understand the importance of a feeling of using the right mental tools in order to work with their teams through their organization to create that profound effect. So, what are some of the other things that we get in terms of the importance of this connection? It deepens, I believe, inner peace. I said, peace? What do you mean? Well, think about the things that are happening on the planet, what's happened in the last few months, what happened last month in the US. Do we need peace? Absolutely. We feel more whole because we're literally integrating the essence of who we are, as opposed to saying, I feel this, but I'm going to do this because this is what everyone else is doing. Or I feel this and I don't care what I think. I don't care what my intuition tells me, which is one of my mental tools. I'm going to do this, even if it harms me or harms somebody else. There's so many examples of incongruency in one that leads to a level of mental distress. It leads to a level of physical distress. It leads to a level of harm to self and others. So we're talking about a healthier body, a healthier unit, a healthier team, a healthier set of organizations in society. So there are a couple of comments before I go on to share more details about what innovative leadership is. I'll give you some examples. Why heart's important, why mind. I want to go to a couple of comments that are placed here. And this one is interesting. Thank you, Tomoko. Consistency is the key in providing vital services and resources for society. People sometimes focus on overnight success and they get frustrated. Indeed. In fact, we're encouraged to just go get that dessert now, go get that whatever it is we want now, as opposed to spending the time to make it, to experience the process of creating whatever it is that we want to enjoy. All of a sudden, we get the senses activated, we get the physical body engaged, and we don't have a just in time something. We have the magical experience of all of it to value that that we take in, that we consume. Tomoko goes on to write, they focus on the impact they have on economic growth. They think big. Often our own passion is not enough to create a new business or service. We need to think about the impact it has for the masses. Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And as we systematically take our time, create that vision, come up with, we don't have to know how to actualize the vision fully, but come up with some initial steps. Then guess what happens? Life itself begins to show up. People show up and they're talking about things that we have in our initial draft plan. And we're like, how did they know? They didn't know. They're sent to us. They're sent to you because you put out that vibration. Yes, I'm being somewhat esoteric, not intentionally so. But literally, we create and we're constantly in the act of creating. So when we honor that we're in the act of creating all day long, usually driven by the emotional mind, not the intellectual mind or the cognitive mind. Yet, if we understand that we can align those two, oh my God, the powerful impact, the results, like the examples I gave, and even more profound. In fact, what leads to the level of creation, if not that heart mind connection? So, what was the next comment that you make, Tomoko? Insight. During times of uncertainty, successful people are proactive and look to provide solutions. Yes. And we know so many people did well last year, even as absolutely a horrific number of people. Over 20 million people lost their gigs, lost their jobs. Some of them were, and hopefully increasingly number of those individuals are recognizing their own capacity to create a business, to join with others in partnership, to build capacity for other people to sustain themselves. Yet, you're right. A lot of folks did well, and businesses did well last year. They look for opportunities during times of challenges. Many try to wait for opportunities to come. Successful people create opportunities for themselves and for others. Some companies were created during economic crisis. Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we are mindful, and that's the power of using our thinking skills, the power of using our emotional competencies, when we're mindful of what's happening around us, conditions, we are more likely to be able to anticipate. Yet we can't do that well short of spending time inside, literally in reflection, literally constantly learning what we don't know. All of us know more than we give ourselves credit, likely. And all of us equally don't know what we don't know. And it's through the readings, it's through the experiences with others, through the observations of other people's experiences that we learn more. And that's also what this broadcast is about. It's about reminding us, it's also about leaving you with some tools that you're able to immediately use to enhance your own leadership. So let's go back to this before we take on additional questions, and we will have some. Thanks to Jet. You'll share that in a few moments. Innovative leadership. I had so many different ways of describing it. And here's some words I want you to keep in mind. So what is it? We get to define it. And there's no one definition. Let's just be very clear about that. But it's really the ability to inspire productive actions in self and others, okay, that lead to desired outcomes. And the desired outcomes may not be outcomes that we can clearly anticipate. They may exceed any imagining that we have. That's really the power of innovative leadership. And it's usually during a time of crisis, a time of ambiguity, a time of creativity, a time of uncertainty. That's what Tomoko just referenced, right? And so let's go on. In order for an organization to really be called innovative, they have to have innovative leaders. Hear me, I said plural, leaders. To really be innovative, not just the individual who's the CEO, and hopefully he or she is innovative, not just the folks who are who are so-called members of the board. Ideally, there's leadership there that's innovative as well. Not always, but hopefully so. So they support and inspire that innovative leader who's at the helm of the organization. And that innovative leader who's the CEO needs to have a right set of leaders among that individual. If she has CFO, COO, you fill in the gap, a line of directors, a line of leads for major units of the organization, all those folks should be inspired to be what? Innovative leaders. That doesn't mean that they're out of control risk takers. No, they're strategic risk. You want risk. You want it to be strategic. And whether it's the frugal type of innovation that deals with a practical need right away, or it's one that anticipates a need. And when folks need it, it's there. And all of a sudden, the organization has morphed, expanded, because it was very smart in reflecting. Another dear friend and colleague, Jennifer Kennedy, just sent me something by email. Literally just minutes before we began the broadcast today. And I don't know if I have it to find. I thought I pulled it up, but I may not be able to find it very quickly. But it's in the San Diego Union Tribune. San Diego is in Southern California in the United States. And they have created, the leadership in that county has decided to do something that is massive. And this is what I call innovative leadership, where you don't even know all the details of how you're going to get there. But they have a broad plan. And what is that big plan? It is to build a desert water pipeline, massive transportation overhaul, and Bay Point development to transform the region to the tune of billions of dollars. They don't really know the actual final number. They know that the pipeline alone is a minimum of $5 billion. And the overall futuristic transportation system is at least $180 billion. So most folks would say, "Oh my goodness, who would go there?" Well, who is an innovative leader would not go there. And they're not just talking about doing it as a county or as a city and a few they're talking big time, engaging and having as partners the University of California at San Diego, San Diego State University. And then major businesses have to be instrumental to this, the community at large. And they don't see the constraint, because they're not trying to make it happen in 10 years or 20 years. They see the opportunities, not just for the generations that they know to be here, but those we can't even imagine to benefit from this vision. And that's what innovative leadership is about. It's about going beyond the obvious and saying, okay, what's the big picture? And how do we imagine for not just for ourselves, not just for our families, not just for our community or business, local businesses, but really large scale impact that's futuristic, that aligns, that integrates, that transforms, and not says it must be done this way, but say, here are some of the aspects of it, and let's do a partnership, collaborate, and see the greatness we can create through our creative geniuses. Powerful. Now, that's not just happening there. We can go different parts of the planet and see it happening in different areas. Whether it's in a small village and they're thinking big, or it's in another country and they're thinking countrywide. Innovative leadership is what we need now, especially. And we need it from youth as we have it in abundance, but they don't get as much airtime. And we need it among the elders who have so much to share. And we need it from the rest of us who have some expertise and are growing more, developing more. I say growing for a reason. So I think that when we stop growing, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says, in a different way, then we really stop living. And many people have stopped living very early in their life, and yet they're still around. And if you are one of those individuals, or a few of those individuals watching this, please get back to growing. Read, listen, engage, learn, grow. That's what we need as a society. So, heart. Heart is considered to be the most powerful ingredient of great leadership. And yet, oftentimes, we don't even think about the heart, right? We think about the mind. What do I think? How do I organize? It's all logical, it's linear. And yet, most creation didn't come from a linear process, more dynamic, bit messy, chaotic. And out of chaos, there's perfect alignment. Mind. What is mind? It's part of a person that thinks, get this, I want you to hear this, reasons, feels, understands, and remembers. And we already said the faculties are what? Their reason, will, memory, intuition, perception, imagination. 6 major aspects of our mental tools. Embedded in there is feeling. That's that emotional mind. Can't have a mind without having feelings. It's inclusive. For some of you, there's a reason why I captured this. I want to read this. What is a mind in psychology? An intellectual and psychological phenomena of an organization encompassing motivational, affective, behavioral, perceptual, and cognitive systems, organized totality of the organism, mental and psychic processes, and the structural and functional cognitive components on which they depend. I know that's a lot of jargon for a lot of people, like, what? I wanted to emphasize the importance of the heart mind connection. There's no description of the mind without feeling. And the power of the heart is to really center the mind, ground it in its humanity. The power of the heart doesn't necessarily guarantee it, but that's the power. And that's the power of powerful, transformative leaders, is to leverage that heart-mind connection to lead, and lead not in a linear way. Read the tea leaves. Look at our society globally, not just locally in our neighborhoods, globally, and say, where are things likely to go? Where might they go with the right kind of innovative leadership? Jet, can you share your question? Ah, how do I advance the synergy between my head, logical mind, and heart, emotional mind? Well, I I think in a simplistic way, you could do 3 steps. You can just identify your predisposition, whatever that happens to be. Are you predisposed to just being led by emotions? Most of us are. Are you predisposed to fight your emotional state and be led by your logical mind? Some of us are. And then ask the question, okay, is there an underlying factor that affects that? And then decide, okay, I want to align them. Well, that's easy to say for me, right? And so, how do you align them? And here's a perspective. Again, there's many. I fundamentally understand. I have an understanding of the mind. There's at least two components of the mind. There's that intellectual, logical mind with those six mental faculties: reason, will, memory, intuition, imagination, and perception. And then there is the emotional mind. I call that the heart mind connection, where we feel. And since we're driven by that emotional mind, the way we change the nature of the emotional mind is not just saying, I'm going to change it. We literally have to change our habits. Who are we if not habits? You've heard that statement. Many of us, in one way or another, it's been stated. We're creatures of habit. So, understanding that, what do we need to do? Use those mental tools to decide what it is that you want to achieve, whatever it is, or experience, or create, or innovate. Two, what is it? And then ask the question, how do I do that? And then engage in a new habit on a consistent basis, a daily basis, no less than 45 days, preferably 60 days. That's the approximate amount of time to change one's way of functioning. A minimum. And if you miss a day, you start from day one again. Embed that new habit. And before you know it, you've begun to shift your emotional state. You have to decide what you want to be that emotional state, because your emotions are driving most of your behavior. If you're getting the results you want, don't change anything. If you're not getting the results you want, or if you want a new result, you must, by definition, change. So use those mental tools, and there are strategies to do that. That's a whole nother conversation. If you're interested, contact me and I'll reference some books. I reference coaching services, et cetera, to do that. And it doesn't take forever to literally shift your habits so that you're much more innovative. You're aligned, that heart, mind connection. Next question, Jet. I work in a very conservative environment. I'm afraid that if I start talking about the heart mind connection, my team and colleagues would think I've lost it. I love it. I love it. I wish you were on here. We could have a fun conversation about that. Well, here's the deal: you don't have to talk about heart mind connection. I led for years. I know folks who are CEOs of corporations who've led for years. They're living the heart, they're living that connection to the mind. They're modeling it. They're not talking heart mind. And some of them not even aware that it's about the heart mind. And yet, when you understand that it's about consciously having a set of values that you're unwavering on, those values are in support of and they honor humanity itself, then you understand from which you come and what you're about. If you're clear about that vision, you want your organization, or organizations with whom you're associated, to literally achieve or actualize, then you're already two steps ahead. You're clear about your values that align with humanity, supports humanity. You are clear about a vision. Now you've got to put things in motion. And what do I mean by that? You need to display what that excellent strategic vision is. You benefit from demonstrating how strong your focus is on this whole humane way of being in support of customers, in support of clients, in support of businesses, in support of society. You benefit from doing that. What else do you benefit from doing? It's understanding that trust must, by design, be reciprocal. So you trust, you have to trust in order for others to trust. So you create that reciprocal trust set of transactions on a regular basis. What's the next piece that's always there? Is having loyalty. And I don't mean blind loyalty. Well, someone says go off the cliff and you jump off the cliff. Well, if that's what you want to do, then you do it. If I don't recommend it, you got a vision, stay around long enough to actualize it. Okay. But loyalty that is clear, it's consistent with your values, your vision. You don't waver. Okay. And if you think you may need to waver, then you're honest about that. You don't just check out and undermine the organization or your partnership or the partners. Then you put faith in the culture that magnifies uh, upward communications. So it's not just about, I know what I want, you do it. It's about, oh, wait, let me listen to all the folks and how, and through my example, engage them in ways where they feel empowered to function in a way that says, here are ideas, here's what's working, here's not what's working, and assess and provide feedback and engage in continuous improvement to get those results, to actualize the vision. And there are other key components to that I can share. But in terms of conservative, so-called conservative environment and liberal environment, independent of the environment, lead by example with core values that are illuminating and supporting the humanity of everyone, and have that vision, be unwavering, demonstrate the heart mind connection. You don't ever have to use the words. Next question, Jet. After 5 years of working, ah, I've seen the traditional model of leadership. I'm starving for my humanity to be validated. What you're describing feels right. Wonderful. I remember being an undergrad at the University of California at Riverside, and I was having a challenge. And I rushed into someone's office who I should have never rushed into. I should have knocked, set an appointment, and then been able to see her. But no, I don't even know what drove me to rush into this woman's office. Her name was Dr. Hayward. I'll never forget. She had been she had retired twice in her career, once from Howard University, I think, and then from the university. But before her retirement, I rushed into her office and I had an issue and I wanted her to solve my issue. And I had never done that with anyone before. And here I am, I'm an introvert, but it was weird. So I sat down, told her what my issue was, and she looked up from her paper where she had been, I guess, painstakingly writing something. And she brings down her glasses on her nose and she looks at me and she says something as simple as, but powerful and on point as, if the group that you're with cannot appreciate what you have to offer, go someplace else where you are appreciated. She put her glasses back up, her head down, and says, and leave my office and do not return and enter unless you've knocked and had an appointment. I backed out of that office. It was like, what did I do? What did I do? The point that I'm making is that not every organization will be able to honor you. So the question is, are you in the right organization? And the other reality is not every organization knows what you need. Are you functioning in a way that allows the organization to give you what you need? So we don't always know. And you're early in your career. And I'm so proud of you asking this important question. 5 years into a role, and you see a classic model. I'm not exactly how you describe classic model, but assuming that it's top down, it's hierarchical, you're not getting your needs met. Here's the deal. Clarify what your needs are. And if you know what they are, you're ahead of the game. And then ask yourself, what in this organization can complement me? What led me here to begin with? Was it just to get a paycheck, just to get benefits, which are powerful, motivators or incentives, I should say? Or was it because it was my dream job? And now I don't find it so much of a dream job. Or I still do, but I don't like the way I'm treated. Then ask yourself, how can you influence the environment to treat yourself well? And then be clear to begin with, are you treating yourself the way you want to be treated? Okay? That's important. Take care of those questions. You will undoubtedly know, if you don't already know intuitively, again, that's a high level mental tool, what is in your best interest. To stay in that organization, give them an opportunity, but you be much more proactive and engaging, leading. And if you're already doing that, conveying what some of your needs are, but be prepared to leave and move into another organization, or for that matter, create your own organization if you find this organization cannot complement your humanity. Okay? I hope that's helpful. Next question. Just started my business. Yes. How do I become an innovative leader? Wow. Well, I hope hearing these lessons have been helpful. And the key thing I always remind people, including my clients, who include executives and mid-level managers, and that is vision, vision, vision. If you have a clue where you're going, you're more likely to get there. Focus, unwavering focus. Once you've set that vision, because that vision really is your fantasy goal that's operationalized, then focus. Focus on one goal at a time to get there. Don't overwhelm yourself with a bunch of nonsense that may not be useful. Just focus. And then be sure that you're emotionally committed to it. So if there's a big issue that comes up, you don't just throw your hands up and say, oh, I gotta try something new. Be emotionally committed, invest, maintain that focus, take the actions that are required, and always be responsible. And here's the thing to remember is that when we pursue something that's brand new, not only is that focus, that emotional commitment, those actions of being responsible so critical, just remember, as Tomoko reminded us earlier on, we have a tendency in this society, the US society in particular, but not just in the US society, Western Hemisphere, of wanting to get what we want yesterday, rather than taking the time to build. Think about that apple. Think about that piece of kale, dinosaur kale. Oh, I love that. Think about the amount of time it took to cultivate for that soil to be nourished, to take the seed, to cultivate that seed so it becomes that kale, becomes that tree, becomes that or brings forth that apple. Think about that process. Well, think about building a business in that way. Think about building your legacy as an employee, if you choose to be an employee within a business. Building, creating the foundation, cultivating it, not just on one off, but literally every day cultivating more and more and more and more. And before you know it, what you've imagined, you created, and it's not going to be a surprise to you, maybe a surprise to other people. How did you do that? Well, I did it with time. And most people don't want to hear all those details. They just want to hear I can do the same thing and do it in 30 days. Take your time. Take your time. Unwavering focus, emotionally committed, burning desire. Nothing causes you to waver. And remember, when you do experience a crisis, it's probably an indication you're doing something right. So you just continue, you break through that terror barrier when you experience it, or you find a way to work around it, to go under, to the side. You don't always have to go right through it, but you do have to address it. You don't benefit from ignoring it, because if you do, another barrier will come up. And the key thing about these barriers or challenges is to prepare you, provide you with the foundation to move forward. That's the powerful thing. That's part of our genius is the capacity to be resilient. Wow. Next question, Jeff. Schools demanded that I rely only on my thinking abilities, mental faculties. Yes, yes, yes. Yet we are emotional beings. Much of what is happening is driven by emotions. Yep, you hear that. Why have we negated this topic? It's interesting. I have a gentleman who's on this show, this broadcast with me once a month, and he'll be on again next month, and that's Dr. Martin Quinde. He reminded us of the fact that we have a tendency of creating things, and the principles on which we create something, and even the models that we used to initially create something, we tend to change them uh, at the margins or even at the core and call them the same thing. So, as an example, and I don't know if I can remember this explicit example, but he used the Bible, for example, and there's a verse in the Bible that's been used, reinterpreted, and then ultimately just changed. And it's about, I think it's about the root of all evil is money. Money is the root of all evil, which is not the literal translation from the Bible, but it's attributed to the Bible. In the same way, we built systems, we built traditions based upon what were seminal truths and effective models, and yet we tweak them. We tweak them at the margins again, or we tweak them at the core, and they're no longer the same. So I think that's what happened in education. There were some models that were understood to be fundamentally right, like the whole notion of mentorship. I mean, higher education started off with mentoring, good old boys mentoring young old boys, right? And preparing for this life of scholarly intellectual engagement. And then and yet at the core of that was this heart mind connection, but that got lost in translation. And there used to be much more of an integration of the disciplines. Well, that's gotten lost to a great degree, and we're trying to move back to that. So we've got psychology over here, we have biology over there, we have sociology over here, we have economics there, we've got mathematics there, and yet to understand any one of these disciplines, we need to understand the other disciplines more fully. So part part of our opportunity and challenge, but I would say opportunity especially, is to recognize that people do the best that they can do at that moment in time. And I know I could hear my goddaughter Lynn saying, "Well, no, sometimes people just do because they want to do." I get that too. But I think for the most part, we don't know what we don't know. And too many of us profess to know more than we do. So we drive home what we understand independent of the historical lessons that we may have never learned. So I say, now that you know that there's much more out there, you invest in your learning. And by your example, others of us will invest more. And that's really the power of each one of us. The more we model, the more people have examples of better models. Other questions? Is that the last question? Okay, that's the last question. Wow. Well, I hope this has been more than just hmm, a reminder that we have the capacity to innovate as leaders, that at the core of an innovative leader is this heart mind coherence, this alignment, this integration, this, I call it really more integration. Um, I hope it reminds us of our humanity, our ability to treat ourselves as individuals in a much more holistic way. We are leading our lives. So we are leaders. Everyone without exception has the capacity to lead and lead with distinction. Because of our spaces that we occupy in society across this planet, we're influencing everything and everyone. I encourage us to honor that, in a way to influence for the greatest good. I'm thinking about the many of you who are having a remarkable year. Things are just singing, they're going well. Your families are healthy. You've been safe. You've been safeguarded. And you're happy. Wow. I am so happy for you. I'm thinking about the folks who are in distress, who are not happy, or have fleeting experiences with happiness. It's not consistent yet, and have not been safeguarded and are very concerned. And some of you even very fearful. My heart, our heart, goes out to you. And we want to remind you that even in that state, you get to create a state that is more, that honors you more. In whatever space you may be in, because of the space or independent of the space, you get to create something that honors you. I remember my first visit to China and had the opportunity to go to a number of different provinces and then watch people live literally on the side of mountains. Wow. Watch people live in houses that their floors were cleaner than mine, it appeared, or any ones that I've seen, and they were dirt floors. uh, Going to different parts of South America, going to different parts of Europe, my goodness, and seeing whether it was extreme distressful conditions, which some of them were, or just people taking what the little that, from my perspective, that they seemed to have and treating as though they were wealthy. Because you know what? They were. It was all mindset. It starts and it ends there. It's not about the things. The things, hopefully, they're useful tools. It's really about this heart mind connection that allows us to experience pure joy, pure happiness in ways that are sustainable. And innovative leaders get that. And they're about creating societies, an overarching global society that where that flourishes. And yes, it is possible. Even given the hate, the distress, the fear, the manipulation, on and on, yes, it's possible. And you know why it's possible? Because we make it possible. We get to flip the switch any moment we want in whatever direction. And we at Lead Live encourage you to flip it in a way that serves the greatest good. Always with deep appreciation. Look forward to seeing you next week. Wednesday, Lead Live sessions. Our broadcasts are about you, inspiring you ideally, and definitely leaving you with tools, information that you can use now. Why don't?